Hi, and welcome back to the next episode of Speak with me, Crystal Danbury, and the awesome Elisa Lynch. And we are joined by a guest today, who is actually my brother also, but Oli Harris. So before we kick off into the subject, Oli, do you want to give everyone a little bit of intro into you and your question?
Oh yeah, I'm Oli Harris, as Crystal's just said. I work on the railway, predominantly as a signalling engineer, but now I work in systems engineering and safety assurance for a consultancy firm.
Amazing. And so this pod came about when we were just trying to unearth back in January. You were listening to one of our pods and we were talking about luck, and then we mentioned something about failure. And
I was supposed to introduce my question, wasn't
I? Yeah. Just helping you out, mate.
But yeah, this is going really well. So my question today was, what is failure, or trying to define failure? Because I listened to your pod a couple of months ago and there was a bit of debate between you and Lisa. And because I'm really fun, I sat and tried to define it myself. And then, I got to a point and I spoke to you and you got excited, and now I'm here on Wednesday evening.
Pretty much how our family works. Really. It's like, oh,
yeah. So no, it's great. But I guess I'll start with my opinion, because I've worked in quite an intense industry and I've been sort of under the cosh for what is known as a failure, and that is when the railway stops running. So we'd refer to when the railway stops running as a failure of an asset, or an asset not performing its role. So there's sort of that piece on an asset failure, and there's also failure if you were to look in sort of a project or a program, not delivering to time and budget, or not delivering to time but delivering to budget. Is that a failure, or is that a learning curve? So then my head spins at a million miles an hour. And let's thrash it out.
Well, I think it's so interesting because that came up, Oli, at the same time that I think I'd posted something on LinkedIn and the link was broken. And I think, did you alert me, Lisa? You were like, oh, it's broken. And you said something about it being a failure, not a failure, obviously, me like, it's a failure. Oh my God. And I went through the same thing, like trying to, and I thought it was wonderful. And I sent this so gushy message to Lisa, didn't I? Which was just like, I think it's really wonderful that we could have completely different feelings on what failure is. And then your question came up. So I think all together, I had that same moment of, well, what really is it and what defines it, and how much deviation from the expected outcome is like, okay, learning curve, or that's catastrophic and that's failure. And I I landed somewhere that I know will be like polar. I think probably to Elisa, and I'm
fucking go.
Let's do it. So I landed on like almost a phrase. For me, I think you said, Oli, two things there that I feel like one is not a failure and one is definitely a failure. For me, failure is when something's gone wrong to the point you can't come back. That's failure because it's failed, right? It's just done. Anything that you can revisit for me is just an opportunity. And I don't know whether I don't know whether that changes my approach to most things, because I'm just like, well, if we can go back and mend it or fix it, or the asset can be replaced or what, fine. Or if your asset fails completely, then yes, for me, that is the definition of failure. Like, it's catastrophic. You can't come back. Everything else that
this is where I'm just going to throw a cricket ball straight at you. And I'll say, we also have assets that fail safe and assets that fail unsafe.
Yeah.
So if on the railway, things are designed to fail safe. So if a level crossing was to fail, they would come down. Oh, sorry, I failed. If they were to malfunction, they would come down to protect the public. If there was an issue with the interlocking, it would revert the signal to danger so that a train can't pass it.
Yeah.
When you lose that integrity of an asset, which is effectively what we call a wrong side failure, you don't have the second roll of the dice. And an example that everyone will know across is Clapham Junction in 1988, when two trains went into each other and caused multiple deaths.
Yeah,
that is a failure.
Yeah.
But then I get even worse. I'm like, well, where does that failure start? And there's there's masses and masses and masses of reports and underlying issues. And it's the same with the Margam incident, which happened a couple of years ago. Two guys in Wales got struck by a train when they were working on right through all of the detailed reports, but anybody working in the industry will know, can visualize how that incident happened. And that's why there's such a push for the track worker safety piece now. So there's lots of different things in that sort of wrong side failure. But then you go back to, like, here's an example. Today, I got an email from Nespresso saying that they couldn't deliver my pods on time within 3 to 5 days. They failed to meet my contract with them. So now they're compensating me with a £10 voucher. But that's their failure to meet a contract. So in my head, I'm like, is that a failure?
Yeah, because it's something they can't come back from, right? It's time critical.
Yeah.
Limit.
But are they not coming back from it by giving you the £10 voucher? They're fixing it. Or they're making up, they're making amends.
£50. It's cost me £50 for.
Well, look, let's not get into an espresso or a fucking ripoff, right? But anyway.
So I think that's
their compensation. So it's the same with, if in safety, if you were to have a slip, trip, or fall in a workshop, the behaviours leading into that incident was either a failure of the person's ability to follow a procedure, or a failure of the procedure in the first place.
Well, I'm fucking glad you said the second part of that sentence, Ollie, or we would fight. I'd be like, have you listened to our podcast?
What's your
that's the thing, isn't it? So there's a word I'm looking for, and it's completely gone out of my head. When you purposely break a rule, like neglect. So you neglect the procedures.
Deviation. Purposeful deviation.
Yeah. You deviate from what you should be doing, and there's an incident. Or you look further back at where the process has gone wrong to end up there, and what has been done to stop that from happening. And then what will happen is, even if that person has deviated from the rules, there'll still be a change to prevent that from happening.
Yeah. Well, if you've got a decent...
I don't want to go off.
Yeah. Nicely pull back yourself. So I figure we've given, like, our versions of things that we think are possibly failures. We've thrown some stuff in the mix. Elisa, thoughts so far? What do you think failure is? What does it feel like to you?
I suppose when the topic was put up first of, like, what is failure, I didn't automatically start thinking about safety stuff at all. I really thought about it in the personal realm.
Yeah.
And even going back to that thing where you were saying you sent this thing and the link was broken, and you were like, isn't that cool that we can learn this? I was like, are you fucking joking? It didn't work. Like, oh my God. Like, I hate this. But yeah, so, like, but I like that idea of, like, failure versus a learning curve.
Yeah.
So yeah, and even, like, what is failure? Like, generally, if I get something wrong or something doesn't pan out how I expect it, I find that really frustrating. Yeah. And it is like, oh, that's a bit of a failure. Now, there's a difference between I have failed at something and I am a failure. Like, they're two very fucking different things.
One is a lot of self-hatred, but yes.
Yeah, one is like, Jesus, talk to someone. And it's only probably fairly recently that I've slightly, I'm not all the way there yet, but managed to kind of go, okay, this is feedback and I can learn from this. And I think I said it to you a couple of weeks ago. I was like, oh, I could nearly get addicted to this feedback because I could just improve. This is great. But yeah, then going into fail safe, fail unsafe, safe to fail. And then, like, and yeah, it's to the point where you can come back for it. And what is that definition?
Yeah, I think the fail safe, safe to fail, all that stuff. for me, and I don't know whether that's just my brain just making it really simple. I'm like, well, I don't feel like it confuses the failure part, because what we're saying, whether you're thinking about a task that you've done or an asset that you have, if they break, something goes wrong in a way that you can't come back from, they're just controls to make sure that nobody gets hurt while that failure is occurring. And essentially, even in your rip-off Nespresso example, they have broken that contract. They've failed to meet the expectation of the customer. They've failed to deliver when they should. They failed the contract. They failed all the things. There isn't a control to mitigate that has worked, because it's happened. So therefore, the only thing they have to do is give you compo, right? And that compo is essentially sorry, isn't it? That's basically, it did go wrong. We've messed up massively, and we've gone past the point of reason. Here's some money to try and keep you as a customer. But I think even if you're failing to danger, failing safe, it's just a different way to cope with that, and that the epicenter of what we're talking about, which is the failure, which I feel like, for me, it does feel like it's something that you just can't come back from. Everything, there's mistakes, slips, lapses and mistakes, let's go there. And I don't think, well, we started talking about this other thing as well, didn't we, about if a fatal, or whether this was my internal thought pattern. Somebody said to me, they were talking about failure a little while ago, and they said, well, one thing that's definitely a failure is if there is a fatality in the workplace, like it's failure. And I was like, yes, because you can't come back from it. But the really important part is then the learning from that. It's so vital to ensure that we know what failed, what point, and what asset, what action, what behavior, like whether it's the management, the culture, what is it that broke to the point that somebody couldn't be saved? And I think it's the same thing. It's just stuff that we can't come back from. But I feel like something in there, Lisa, with your thing about that link, it feels emotional. It feels like, I feel like even if I fix this, I'm not coming back. Like, we got it wrong the first time. That's the bit that stays. The rest is like mitigating how I feel about the failure. And I wonder what causes those two things, like them to be so so far apart. Thoughts?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm also, you're really getting to know how fun I am now. I actually looked up the definition on Google.
I nearly did. Go on.
And it's defined as a lack of success.
Oh my God. And what a softer. Well, that's pretty soft, isn't it?
A lovely way of putting it, isn't it? But in my head, I'd be like, well, a failure to me is not meeting the requirements of a deliverable, whether you're delivering espresso pods or delivering a project or delivering training or delivering a progression plan for a member of staff. So another example is where I've had people in a team, and my manager come to me and he said, if you can't get that guy up to this level, then you failed him as a manager, because he's got bags of potential and he's X, Y, and Z. Which I think is quite interesting. And to be fair to him, he was absolutely right. I did get him and beyond that. but he made a valid point. And it was a big learning curve for me as well. And it was an interesting point as well, because I've never had that described to me in that way. And that was when I went to London, and I thought, I like London. It's very straight talking. I come from the woolly countryside. But no, exactly where
very direct here in London.
Yeah. Isn't that funny though? Because I wonder whether something in that feels like it's that manager's version of failure, in that was like, if you don't do it, you failed this guy. He's passed that baton to you for you to internalize, I would be failing.
Yeah. And
I just feel like, well, I could definitely manage somebody that has bags of potential, but if they don't want to get there, and let's just say that, it's not my failure. And it's very, very straight talking.
So is it their failure then? But if they don't want to get there, then it's not a failure that they don't get there.
Well, I suppose it's and that's the thing, isn't it? I was just thinking about, can you can one thing be a success and be a failure, but to two different people?
Yeah, because it's how you define success. If you're saying failure is a lack of success,
yeah,
then it goes back to our previous podcast with Sam Neill of, well, what is success?
yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
And what's popping into my head, and this is really fucking fluffy now, I'm going to get an eye roll, but right? When we talk about failure, where does the role of forgiveness play in failure, and can that bring you back?
Ooh.
Depends if you own the purse. I don't know. I think everyone's made mistakes. It's a mistake of failure. I don't think it is. I think that's where you break the barrier of a mistake and go into a failure. I'd probably say, in my opinion, that there isn't coming back. But if you didn't meet that requirement because of a mistake and you put your hands up and said, this has gone wrong, we'll learn from it and learn from it properly, not just talk about it, make, change and learn and do a proper wash down of what happened, then there is forgiveness there, isn't there? But if you were to just, something doesn't work and you walk away from it, that then becomes a failure, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, there's this interview I'm thinking about. I think it was, I can't remember what podcast it was on, but it was this guy, oh, I might get his name wrong. I think it's Ivan Popudli, but I could be wrong. But this guy who basically fucking revolutionized the Forest Service in the USA. And like, there was loads of firefighters dying with all these wildfires and all the rest. But there was one time where a firefighter had died, and like they went to it had always been very like combative of, of like, oh, someone's died, bring down the shutters, defensibility, all the rest. But this time they went to the family and they were like, we're so sorry, and like, but we will fucking learn from this, and we will, and they like really brought the family into the fold, and were really super, super transparent with, this is where the failure was, this is why your family member died, this is what we're going to do across our whole business to make sure this doesn't happen again. Now, whether that led to forgiveness or not, I don't know, but it definitely took the, I don't know, adversary out of it maybe, or something. But it's when you go to like that level of failure of somebody has died, they can't come back from that, but can we as a business come back from this?
You're triggering my thought about where accountability plays into failure, and whether that makes it easier to digest or easier to come back from. And I suppose what I'm thinking of is like, so I had an awesome woman work for me called Jo, and she missed the beat on something pretty big. And I got a phone from her one day, and she was just like, mate, I've messed up hard, like real bad. We're going to get a massive invoice. It's loads of money, and I've dropped the ball. And so all the things, right, can't come back from it. It's a fait accompli. The money's there. And I said to her, and she was just like, it's on me. I did this. These are the series of events that happened. These are all the balls that I dropped to get here. It's my fault. And I was like, okay, thank you. I said, from here, I'll let you be the one to tell finance, because it's yours. But from here, we won't speak about it. We'll just talk about how we move forward. Her complete accountability around the fact that she'd failed hard, right? For me, made me feel like she was really succeeding as a leader, because she was in there. She was not passing that buck. She did not talk about anyone else in that process. She said, that was me. And not just that was me trying to blanket it, but gave me the steps to which she broke it. And then was like, of course, I'll make the call. I'll make the call now. And so technically, yeah, total fail. Could the business afford the failure? Yeah. Would we bounce back with it? Is it going to be something we talk about in a year? Well, maybe. But like in a couple of years, maybe not.
Do you remember that time you lost a couple of grand?
Remember that time? It was like near the, it was like,
okay, more than a couple.
Yeah, hundreds. But it was like, I really think you are a success. If it's this lack of success, technically she failed a process and properly stuffed up, I really felt she won that day by being
Mm.
fully accountable for her mistake. And there's nothing we could go back on. There's nothing we could do. But I think she nailed it. So that's an interesting thing for me to ponder on, is, do I think she failed that day? Yes and no, but in different aspects. Like the job part, fail; the leadership person, win. And I'm also thinking about the split between, say you go into an organization, any three of us goes into the organization, and we transform it, and you see major harm plummet. All the reporting goes up, people are having better conversations, you know, all this sort of stuff, all the good stuff that you want to see happening, better conversations, but people are still getting hurt, naturally, because you're never going to get rid of everything, right?
Yeah.
Can you deem it a success when performance is going in the absolute right way and you're killing it, when you know people are still at some point getting hurt? Can you applaud and say you are succeeding? There is success.
That's what you measure is, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But if you're measuring a 50% drop in all the major things and a 50% increase in all the major things, and it's like, yeah, there's still a number at the bottom. There's still somebody getting hurt. Is that still success? Is that still, are you still transforming? Can you still celebrate if one individual is getting hurt?
Yes and no. I mean, it's comparative, isn't it, as well, to historic figures. I think if you're seeing improvement in positive step change, then I'd deem that a success.
Yeah, me too.
People getting hurt will eventually reduce until nobody gets hurt, and that's when we become autonomous, and that's the direction that the world is driven in. You know, AI, data, autonomous systems, as sad as they are in doing people's jobs for them, they don't have any incidents or accidents because they do.
Well, we're not there yet now. Driverless cars are fucking driving off bridges and stuff. Like, you know, I'm not into it, lads.
There's trains in Australia driving themselves.
Yuck.
500 kilometers.
I don't like it.
But they are coming off the rails as well at the same time.
So, like, I'm not getting on your train, mate.
However, they're freight trains. They've got no passengers on them. However, it's not the train's fault. It's the track's fault. It'll be like a buckle because the heat. So there's...
Well, yeah, to be fair, they're dealing with a bit of heat down there, yeah.
Yeah, they have extremes of both weather. So they have autonomous trains, and they do what they're told to do, and they go from A to B. And if they interface with a track, and that's where the problem is.
And then I come into another problem. I'm starting to write a book, and I've just been writing this paragraph on seeing harm holistically, as in mental harm and physical harm, and we really are okay and well versed in talking about physical harm. But we are just rubbish at taking account of mental impact from anything. Even if things like risk assessment, we don't talk about psychological impact, we don't talk about, you know, risk of trauma, we talk about like a broken leg or whatever. And I was thinking about those scenarios where more and more people, what we're talking about is like lose their job, and we will deem it success because things are evolving and we've got technology in and it's all AI and it's all wonderful. But the knock-on is mass communities and people, like from a societal perspective and from an income perspective and the way people earn their money, there'll be mass. It will feel like we're failing people. For me, more and more people lose their job, they can't maintain income, that doesn't feel good. If that was the way that everything went, which it won't, there's always going to be places for people, of course, but it does.
But I don't think it. I think what companies and industries have a responsibility for is being transparent in what they want to deliver and making, you know, other jobs available. Just because one job's going doesn't mean another one isn't appearing.
Yeah.
So like the people that used to maintain the track, or I don't know, a car, can then retrain. There needs to be a step to retrain to look at the data and make decisions based on data. There's so many data-driven jobs. You'll always need people to change views, change.
And it's that thing of just transition, isn't it? So like all of that has to be planned in.
if you look at the country as a whole, and I didn't want to get into the strikes, but the reason that everybody is striking is because there's no transparency from any industry top down to say what's actually happening, because everyone's got ideas and change and going to make big changes, but there's no transparency there, and people don't really understand why the change is happening, and there's no precursor as to why it's changing. So I think if businesses were more responsible and transparent, there would be less dismay, I guess, further down, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but then they wouldn't be able to be up to their dodgy shit making all their money, you know. So yes, but actually there's something about there was this thing about transparency around like gender pay gap and all this stuff, and happy International Women's Day, etc. But this thing of how actually transparency hasn't made a difference. So for all these places that have to publish their numbers and all they're publishing them, they're not changing.
But it blows my mind. Like the pay gap thing just completely blows my mind. I can't get my head around how you can have two people doing the same job and pay them differently, because I've not been brought up in that society or system, or for the businesses that I worked for. It's not a thing. So it obviously is a thing, but I've never been a party to it. So I just approach day to day, crutching around, speaking to random blokes who broke their back and 5 ribs.
That is a link to a previous story, by the way.
Previous recording story.
For me, it's great. I really love, the women in engineering piece as well, because I know, like, I don't want to name companies, but the previous company that I worked for, massive drivers of it, and it was brilliant. And I, even down to things like one of my wife's friends, she went and she did an evening course doing carpentry, and I was so happy. And I was like, have these tools.
I'm not using them. Here, have these.
Because it's bringing good people into the industry that we need, and big abdicator. But it's never really been I've never had to deal with it or face it head on, so I don't really know how it feels.
Yeah, not gonna lie to you, Oli, there's probably a lot on the gender stuff you haven't had to deal with because you're on the good, you're on the handier side of it.
But it was funny because my friends come for dinner on Sunday and they said, I had the girls on Saturday and I was taking them shopping in Aldi, and a lady came over to me and she said, have you got the 2 girls on your own? And he went, yeah. And he went, oh, that's amazing. So he went home and told his wife, and she was like, well, why is it a thing? Because it shouldn't really be a thing. I've got no problem.
Dad taking this kid.
It wasn't a bloke that went over to him and asked that. It's a different generation of people.
Yeah. How low is the fucking bar? Right. Sorry. Like, oh, you're parenting, you're unreal. Oh.
But I think if you ever watched, and not to go off on a tangent about it, but if you
we're already gone.
Yeah, Ali Wong. If you watch Ali Wong on Netflix, she basically says the bar is so low to be a shitty mum and so high to be a shitty. Like, you change a diaper and you, or you take your kids shopping, you, but you're a woman and you decide to go on a girls' trip when the kid, you go on a girls' weekend away and you leave the kids with your husband, and it's just like, oh, do you not feel bad for that, or do you not? It's a completely, like,
I think one of the most obvious phrases for me is like, oh, a really involved dad. Have you ever heard of an involved mom?
No, she's just
no. That fucking phrase doesn't exist because she's just doing it all. But oh, he's really involved. Fuck. Anyway, lads, we should be getting back to failure now because I'll just get too wound up.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so I think one of the things that you were talking about before we went down the rabbit hole there was that transparency piece, and it was making me think about communication and whether that can sometimes be the mass difference between a feeling of failure and a feeling of like there's an opportunity to move.
Absolutely.
I was well, any thoughts on that? Because I was just thinking about the way that Joe communicated to me. I got this really wrong, and it really annoyed me. She always, well, I'll just finish the part. I was going to say it and then I double thought myself. She always says, hey boss, and I hate it. It's the reason she does it, because if she knows it scratches. It's like, hey boss, like, I've really messed up. And just the way that she was so clear, it just gave such an opportunity to move forward. But if she'd phoned me up not being transparent, tried to hide the damage, not taking accountability for the action, trying to pass the blame, it would have felt so much bigger. Like the problem is exactly the same, but yet it feels catastrophic because now I'm dealing with lots of people and lots of different disparate edges, but it wasn't, it was just like precise. So I don't know whether, any feelings on communication.
I've got so many experiences where people that I've worked with have made bad decisions, and there's been a failure as a result of that bad decision. I've had some people that put their hands up straight away and say, Oli, I've made a massive mistake. This is what's happened. And I'll say, no problem, but I have to lead an investigation anyway, because you don't just investigate that. But they might think that they've done something wrong, but further down the line, it might be uncovered that it was actually something else that happened, which led to that. So, and I've also had the straight up lie to my face, and I've got witness statements and evidence and everything else. So yeah, definitely when people are open, honest, and are accountable is a really good word to use for their actions. I can't be angry at somebody that's saying sorry to me. It's really, really hard to be upset with somebody that's apologizing and taking full accountability for a mistake and wants to do something different or be part of the rectification. But quite often you have to take them people out of the situation and like debrief them afterwards. In the role that I've had to be in for my career, I'm trying to refrain from proper facts because I
love that I just dropped Joe in it, like
and I've been in a situation where I've made a mistake and I've gone home after a night shift and I've woke up and my boss has called me and said, Ollie, was this part attached to that? I was like, yeah, is it not now? He said, no, you've changed it. He said, they've not been running trains on the West Coast main line all morning. I was like, I'm putting my clothes on. I'm in the van. I'm on my way to work. He's like, no. I was like, I'll come and fix it. I'll do anything. He was like, the best thing for you to do now, as hard as it is just to be at home and rest, because I've had about 3 hours sleep anyway. It was a really tough night shift. And I wanted to just go and rectify the issue that I'd caused. But sometimes it's best because you just go in with the old blinkers on. It's for you to just stay out of it and then debrief and think about it afterwards. And then I think because I was honest, nothing really come of it, to be fair. Other than
then is like, so you can tell when somebody's being genuine, right? You can when they're like, I really fucked up. I'm really fucking sorry. But also, and it comes back to this response matters thing, which we spoke about on the last episode. And so it's the response of the person who fucked up matters, but then also the response of the manager matters. Because if you go to the person who fucked up, I'm going to bollock you out of it. You're like, well, I'm not telling you about my next mistake, then am I?
No.
I won't own up to it next time because I'll be too scared to.
Yeah. It's also, so this is it's a really interesting example, Ollie, that with obviously clearly a very good manager saying to you, just rest. Like it is done. I needed to ascertain what happened. I have sleep and then come in the next day. I'm thinking about how much, and this is like thinking about the listener as well and thinking about the leaders that might be listening, the people with teams, how much of an impact the response from the manager has on the size of the failure. Like, does it mushroom if you then make it massive, or how they hold that individual to account? Is it messy? Is it angry? Is it mean? And what I'm thinking about is if your boss had phoned you to say, oh my God, you've messed up this line. I am absolutely livid. Don't you dare come into work. That feeling of failure would have gone straight inside and would probably be sat with you maybe for your entire career. But the fact that he's just like, no, it's done, but we got this. I just needed to know that it was that part. You get some rest, come in tomorrow. Like two completely different scenarios, and yet the same outcome for the rail, but for you and him and the party, his management of that situation feels like not catastrophic failure, but something that you can come back from.
And you've learned from.
Yeah. I've had both. Both somebody shouting down the phone whilst I've been honest, and I've had both where they've been kind. But the culture's drastically changed, especially in the railway in the last 10 years, massively. But I've also, so the end result of my one, so I learned from bad managers to not do what they do. So I take the good and go the bad. So the one where the guy had come to me and been honest, and I sent him home, and I had to get him DNA tested and all that lot. And I checked in on him for a couple of days, and his wife cooked me a banana bread.
Winning.
That's how much
You're
it
learning
means
to get the banana bread.
Doing the work. That's how much it means to them, is that his wife made me a banana bread for checking in on him, making sure he was all right, and trying to coach him through it. But I guess if I was only ever given a you've really messed this up, it's on you type view from everyone, I probably would have passed that on to that guy. So I'm a big believer in the shift in leadership has been because our previous leaders were led by people that were in the war, and the only way that they knew how to lead was through the military way in a battlefield. So then they were managed like that. They managed the next people like that. And then somebody went, what? why are we speaking? Why am I speaking to this person like that? And then they've spread that joy and love. And I think people are a lot more accountable and a lot more open and honest about their mistakes, and feel a lot more comfortable and less judged, because everything used to be swept away. Yeah, there's some reflection.
I think if I was going to throw like my final thoughts, I'd be really interested, Elisa, in yours as well. I think the bit I've taken from this is everybody's version of failure it's actually subjective, because success is right. Your version and your definition of success is completely bespoke to you. So therefore, so is failure. But actually the way that we respond, the way that we are accountable for it, and the way that the people leading us respond to our failures can determine our leadership styles, the teams that we cultivate, and also just like the level of impact of any failure can be dictated just by how it's responded to, or how you are accountable for it. So yeah, I thought we were going to come out of today with like, this is what failure is, but actually I'm coming out thinking it's whatever you feel it is, and it's how we respond to it that is the most important thing. Thoughts?
Yeah, I would agree. It is definitely that thing on response, and it's for everything, like where it's at a personal level, if you're managing someone, but even like businesses, governments, all this is how you respond. There can be a fuck up, but if you pull down the shutters and you're not willing to go, okay, we fucked up, we need to learn here, then people are not going to be on your side, whether that's your manager, whether it's societies or whatever it is. Quite often backlash just gets worse if there isn't that level of ownership, accountability, and transparency.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I think it's probably a very good time to wrap. And thank you, Oli, for being a star, posing a good question, and coming on and talking with us about it. And thank you to everybody that has listened or watched us. And we hope you join us in a couple of weeks for the next episode of Speak. Take care. Stay safe.
See ya. Bye.